You've spent enough time at sea to know when something is wrong before you see it. It's in the air first. The way the gulls circle without landing. The way the water holds too still against the hull. The way sound seems to flatten, like someone pressed pause on the whole harbor and forgot to hit play again. That's what it felt like the morning the Meridian came home. You weren't supposed to be there. Commander Elias Ward wasn't supposed to be there either, but that's how these things work in the Navy. You go where you're told, when you're told, and you don't ask questions until after you've already seen what you weren't supposed to see. The Meridian had been missing for 16 days. Not lost, not declared, just missing. No distress calls, no Mayday signals, no wreckage reports from passing vessels or overhead reconnaissance. She'd simply stopped answering radio checks somewhere in the North Atlantic shipping lanes, and then she'd vanished like a name written in steam on a mirror. Command had quietly reassigned her patrol route. Her crew's families were told there were communication difficulties. Official channels stayed silent. You know how it works. The Navy doesn't panic in public. It waits. It watches. And if a ship comes back on its own, well, that's just good seamanship, isn't it? Except the Meridian didn't just come back. She glided into harbor at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, cutting through the fog like a blade through silk. No flags, no running lights, no one visible on deck. Just the slow, deliberate movement of a vessel that knew exactly where it was going. The harbor master saw her first, called it in with a voice that didn't sound right over the radio, tight, controlled like a man trying very hard not to say what he was actually thinking. By the time Ward arrived at the pier, a small crowd had gathered. Dockhands, morning shift personnel, a few civilians who'd been walking their dogs along the waterfront and stopped because something about the ship's approach made them want to stay very, very still. She came in without assistance. No tugboats, no harbor pilot, just a smooth, practiced turn that brought her starboard side flush against the pier, close enough that you could have stepped aboard without even jumping. Lines hung loose from the cleats, drifting in the windless morning like kelp in shallow water. The gangway hadn't been deployed. The deck was empty, perfectly, unnervingly empty. Ward stood at the edge of the pier, hands in the pockets of his coat, eyes tracking the length of the ship from bow to stern. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as the Meridian settled against the dock with a soft groan of wood against rubber fenders, and then went still. Beside him, Chief Bosun Matthew Hale shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Hale was a broad-shouldered man with hands that looked like they'd been carved from driftwood and a face that gave away absolutely nothing unless he wanted it to. Right now, it was giving away plenty. She shouldn't have been able to do that, Hale said quietly. Ward didn't look at him. Do what? Dock herself. Not without crew. Not in a cross-current harbor like this. Hale's eyes moved across the ship's deck, scanning for movement, for anything that would explain what they were seeing. You need hands on the helm, hands on the throttle, hands on the lines. You don't just drift in. Maybe someone's still aboard. Then why aren't they showing themselves? Ward didn't have an answer for that. Neither did anyone else standing on the pier. The crowd had gone quiet now. That same unnatural silence that had settled over the harbor, clinging to them like wet cloth. Even the water seemed wrong. No waves, no ripple, just a flat, gray surface that reflected nothing. Get a boarding team ready, Ward said finally. Full inspection. I want eyes on every compartment, every berthing space, every storage locker. If there's anyone aboard, I want them found. If there's not, he trailed off. Hale finished the thought for him. If there's not, we've got a bigger problem. The boarding team assembled within 20 minutes. Ward, Hale, Lieutenant Jonah Pierce, the Meridian's former navigation officer who'd been temporarily reassigned to shore duty pending the ship's return, and Chaplain Thomas Blackwood, who'd been conducting a routine inspection of another vessel in the harbor when the call came through and had simply appeared at the pier without being asked. Blackwood was a tall, lean man in his early 50s with silver hair and the kind of calm that made people either trust him immediately or distrust him intensely. He didn't speak much, didn't need to. He had the presence of someone who'd spent a lifetime listening to confessions and last rites. And he carried that weight the way other men carried rank. Pierce, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. He was young, 29, though he looked younger, and his hands kept moving to his pockets, then away, then back again. Nervous energy. The kind you see in men who've convinced themselves that logic and procedure will protect them from things that don't care about logic or procedure. Should we wait for a full security sweep? Pierce asked as the team gathered at the base of the gangway. Standard protocol would be. Standard protocol assumes we're boarding a ship that asked for help. Ward interrupted. She didn't ask. She just came home. We're going to find out why. Hill was already moving. He climbed the gangway with the kind of practiced efficiency that comes from decades at sea, his boots hitting each step with a steady rhythm that echoed too loudly in the silence. Ward followed, then Pierce, then Blackwood, who moved with the same unhurried calm he brought to everything, as if boarding an abandoned ship was no different than walking into a chapel for morning prayer. The deck smelled like salt and oil and something else. Something Ward couldn't quite place. It wasn't decay. It wasn't fuel. It was just cold. The kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with absence. The Meridian was a patrol vessel, medium displacement, multi-role capability, crew complement of 48 officers and enlisted personnel. She was old but well-maintained. The kind of ship that got the job done without making headlines. Her deck was clean. Hatches secured, equipment stowed, everything in its place, except the people. Spread out. Ward ordered, Hale, take the engine room. Pierce, check navigation and communications. Blackwood, you're with me. We'll start with the berthing spaces. Hale nodded and disappeared through a hatch leading below. Pierce hesitated for just a moment, long enough for Ward to notice, and then followed his own assignment toward the bridge. That left Ward and Blackwood standing alone on the main deck, the silence pressing in around them like deep water. You feel that? Blackwood asked quietly. Ward didn't answer right away. He did feel it, had felt it the moment he'd stepped aboard. It was the same feeling he'd had twice before in his career. Once on a cutter that had found a drifting lifeboat with no survivors, and once on a destroyer that had responded to a distress call only to find the distressed vessel completely intact and completely empty. Both times, the ships had smelled like this, felt like this, like stepping into a hell breath. Let's move, Ward said. They descended into the ship through the forward hatch, their footsteps ringing hollow on the metal stairs. The lighting was functional, emergency power still running, but dim enough that shadows pooled in the corners and stretched long across the bulkheads. The passageways were narrow, lined with pipes and conduit and 1,000 small details that make a ship a living thing. Except this ship didn't feel alive. The first berthing space they entered was immaculate. Racks neatly made, personal effects arranged with almost obsessive precision. Photographs tacked to the bulkheads, families, girlfriends, dogs, places people wanted to go. A pair of running shoes sat beside one bunk, laces tied, perfectly aligned. A book lay open on another rack, spine up, as if someone had been reading and intended to come right back. Ward moved through the space slowly, eyes scanning every detail. Blackwood stayed near the hatch, hands clasped behind his back, watching. No signs of struggle, Ward said. No hurry. They didn't leave in a panic. No, Blackwood agreed. They left because they wanted to. Ward turned to look at him. You can't know that. Can I? Before Ward could respond, Hale's voice crackled over the handheld radio clipped to his belt. Commander, you need to see this. Ward keyed the radio. Łatwe Ugot. Engine room. Everything's secure. Everything's perfect. But there's coffee cups down here. Still half full. Still warm. Pierce's voice cut in, sharper, more strained. Bridge is the same. Logbook's open. Last entry is dated 16 days ago. Handwriting steady. No indication of distress. It just stops. Mid-sentence. Ward looked at Blackwood. The chaplain's expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had shifted. Recognition, maybe, or resignation. Everyone converge on the galley, Ward ordered. 5 minutes. They met in the ship's small mess area, a cramped space with bolted-down tables and benches that smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning solution. Hale arrived first, his face unreadable. Pierce came in behind him, looking pale. Blackwood moved to one of the benches and sat, his hands folded on the table in front of him. Ward stood. Report. Hale spoke first. Engine room's clean. No damage. No malfunction. Fuel reserves are at 70%. All systems operational. The ship was under power when she came in. Had to be. But there's no one at the helm. No one in the engine spaces. No one anywhere. Pierce cleared his throat. Communications are functional. Radio's on the right frequency. No outgoing transmissions logged after the last position report 16 days ago. Navigation charts are current. Course plotted back to this harbor. Everything's normal, except it's not. Ward turned to Blackwood. Anything from the crew spaces? Only what you saw, Blackwood said quietly. Order, intention, and absence. That you didn't leave behind anything? Pierce asked, his voice rising slightly. No notes? No explanation? Not yet, Ward said. But we're going to find one. Split up again. Deeper search. I want personal effects examined. I want every locker opened. I want. Commander. Hale's voice was low, controlled. The voice of a man who'd just seen something he didn't want to talk about, but knew he had to. There's one more thing. Ward waited. The aft deck. I went out there before coming down. Wanted to check the mooring lines, see if maybe someone had secured them from shore. He paused. There are boot prints, leading from the rail, straight to the edge. And then nothing. What do you mean, nothing? I mean they stop, right at the edge, like someone walked to the rail and then just... Hale made a small gesture with his hand, a kind of weightless falling. Stepped off. Pierce stood up abruptly. That's impossible. Someone would have had to tie the lines. Someone had to bring the ship in. I'm telling you what I saw. Then you saw wrong. Gentlemen, Ward's voice cut through the rising tension like a blade. Both men went silent. We're going to continue the search. Methodically, thoroughly, and we're going to find out what happened to this crew. Hale, take the aft compartments. Pierce, forward berthing. Blackwood, and I will check the officers' quarters. Move. They moved. Ward and Blackwood descended deeper into the ship, their footsteps the only sound in the long, narrow passageways. The officers' quarters were located amidships, a series of small private cabins barely large enough for a bunk, a desk, and a locker. The first three they checked were identical to the enlisted berthing, neat, organized, recently occupied. The fourth was different. The door was closed, but not locked. Ward pushed it open and stepped inside. The cabin belonged to the Meridian's executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Voss. Ward had met her once, briefly, at a conference in Newport. Sharp, professional, the kind of officer who made you believe she had everything under control even when the world was falling apart. Her cabin reflected that. Everything was precisely arranged. Her bunk was made with hospital corners. Her uniforms hung in the locker, evenly spaced. Her desk was clear except for a single item, a leather-bound journal. Ward picked it up. The cover was worn smooth from handling. The pages inside filled with neat, careful handwriting. He flipped to the last entry. Day 16. Position holding. Crew morale stable. No mechanical issues. Weather clear. Sea calm. Too calm. It's been 3 days since we heard it. Not a sound. Not a voice. Something else. Something underneath. In the water. In the hull. In the spaces between our thoughts. The men are listening now. Some of them have stopped talking. They just stand at the rails and look out at the water like they're waiting for someone to call their name. I tried to order a course change. Navigation wouldn't respond. Not defiance, just distance. Like I was speaking a language they'd forgotten. I think we forgot too. I think we've been forgetting for a long time. The entry ended there. No signature, no final note, just blank pages after that. Ward looked up. Blackwood was standing in the doorway, watching him. She knew, Ward said quietly. Yes. She knew something was wrong, and she didn't, he stopped. Didn't finish the thought. Because what was she supposed to do? Call it in? Report that her crew was hearing things that weren't there? That they were standing at the rails like men in a trance? No one would have believed her. And even if they had, what would they have done? Ordered her to turn back? She tried. Navigation wouldn't respond. Because they were already listening. We need to get off this ship, Ward said. Blackwood didn't move. Do we? Ward stared at him. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've felt it since the moment you stepped aboard. The pull, the quiet, the sense that maybe, just maybe, if you stayed here long enough, you'd finally understand what they understood. That's insane. Is it? Blackwood's voice was soft, almost gentle. You've been at sea your whole life, Commander. You've lost friends to the water, watched men disappear, seen things you never reported because you knew no one would believe you. And every time you felt it, didn't you? That little whisper in the back of your mind. The one that says the ocean isn't just water. It's waiting, and it's patient, and it knows you. Ward's hand tightened on the journal. We're leaving. Now. He turned and walked out of the cabin, moving fast, his boots echoing in the passageway. Blackwood followed, still calm, still unhurried. They found Hale and Pierce in the galley. Both men looked shaken. We need to evacuate, Ward said. Now, this ship isn't safe. I found something, Pierce said. His voice was unsteady. He held up a piece of paper, folded once. It was in the chapel, tucked inside a prayer book. Ward took it, unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, the kind of handwriting you use when you want to make absolutely sure someone understands what you're saying. We were not taken. We were called. It promised calm. Below that, 48 names. Every member of the Meridian's crew, each one signed in their own hand. At the bottom, in larger letters, the sea does not forget. Ward's vision blurred. The edges of the paper seemed to darken. And for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, he could have sworn he heard something. Not a voice, not a sound, just a feeling, a pressure, like deep water closing over his head. And then it was gone. We're leaving, Ward said again. His voice sounded distant even to himself. Right now, they climbed the ladder back to the main deck. The air outside was still windless, still gray. The harbor around them was silent. No gulls, no waves, just flat, empty water stretching away in every direction. Ward was halfway across the deck when he heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere below. He froze. Hale heard it too. His hand went to the sidearm at his hip. Pierce went pale. Blackwood simply stopped and listened, his head tilted slightly, like a man trying to place a familiar melody. The footsteps continued, steady, unhurried, the sound of boots on metal deck plates, moving through the passageways they just left. Moving up, Ward said. Now. They ran, down the gangway, across the pier, away from the Meridian and her empty decks and her waiting silence. They didn't stop until they were 50 yards clear, standing on solid ground with the morning fog swirling around them. Ward turned back. The ship sat exactly as they'd found her, perfectly still, perfectly intact, and on the aft deck, just visible through the fog, a line of boot prints leading from the interior hatch to the rail. Fresh prints, wet prints, prints that hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Ward felt something shift in his chest. A pull, a whisper, the same thing he'd felt in Lieutenant Commander Voss's cabin, the same thing he'd felt twice before in his career, standing on the decks of ships that should have had crews and didn't. The ocean doesn't take men by force. It waits for consent. And somewhere, deep in the water beneath the Meridian's hull, something was still waiting. The harbor master's office smelled like stale coffee and diesel fumes. Ward sat at a borrowed desk. The Meridian's crew manifest spread out in front of him like a map to nowhere. 48 names, 48 lives, all of them gone, and none of them dead. At least not in any way that would show up on a casualty report. Hale stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the fog roll in off the water. Pierce sat in the corner, his laptop open, running through communication logs and satellite tracking data for the 100th time, looking for patterns, looking for explanations, looking for anything that would make this make sense. Blackwood had disappeared an hour ago, said he needed to check something, didn't say what. They had to have gone somewhere. Pierce said, his voice tight with frustration. People don't just vanish. There's always evidence, always a trail. Is there? Hale asked without turning from the window. Yes, there is, because that's how reality works. You've been at sea, what, 3 years? Hale's voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. You think that's long enough to know how reality works out there? I think it's long enough to know that ghost stories don't explain missing crews, then explain the footprints. Pierce didn't have an answer for that. Neither did Ward. The print had been there, fresh, wet, leading from below deck to the rail, and then they'd simply stopped. No return marks, no scuff marks from struggle, just a straight line from the hatch to the edge, and then nothing. Like someone had walked to the rail and stepped off into water that had been waiting to catch them. Ward rubbed his eyes. He hadn't slept, hadn't even tried. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that journal entry. Something underneath, in the water, in the hull, in the spaces between our thoughts. We're missing something, he said finally. The boss knew what was happening. She documented it. The crew signed that note. This wasn't random. It was deliberate. Deliberate suicide? Pierce asked. All 48 of them just decided to walk into the ocean. Not suicide, Hale said. He turned from the window, his face carved from shadows. Acceptance. Of what? Whatever called them. Pierce slammed his laptop shut. This is insane. We're sitting here talking about what exactly? Sea monsters? Mermaids? Some kind of mass hallucination. I'm talking about the ocean, Hale said simply, and what it does to men who spend too long listening to it. Ward knew what he meant. Every sailor did, even if they never said it out loud. There's a point, usually around the 3rd or 4th month of a long deployment, where the ship stops feeling like a vessel and starts feeling like a world. The only world. The land becomes theoretical, abstract, something you remember the way you remember dreams. And the ocean becomes real in a way it wasn't before. You start to notice things. The way the water moves when there's no wind. The way certain sounds carry across the waves at night. Sounds that shouldn't carry. Voices that shouldn't be there. The way you'll sometimes wake up in your rack at 0, 300 and know, absolutely know, that something large and patient is moving beneath the hull. Most sailors shake it off. Come back to shore. Readjust. Remember that the ocean is just water and physics and weather patterns. But some don't. Some keep listening. I want the crew's service records, Ward said. All of them. How long they've been at sea. Previous assignments. Psych evals if we can get them. Pierce nodded and reopened his laptop. I can pull those. What are we looking for? Pattern. Connection. Something that explains why these particular 48 people all decided to. Ward stopped. He'd been about to say abandoned ship, but that wasn't right. They hadn't abandoned anything. They just left, gone to where they were called. The door opened. Blackwood stepped in, carrying a worn canvas bag. He set it on the desk in front of Ward without a word. Ward looked inside. Books. Old books. The kind with cracked leather spines and pages that smelled like salt and thyme. Maritime journals. Collections of sailors' testimonies. Accounts of unexplained disappearances at sea dating back 200 years. Where did you get these? Ward asked. The chapel archive, Blackwood said. Every naval chaplain, keeps them. Records of the things we hear in confession. The things sailors tell us when they think they're going mad. The things we're not supposed to talk about in official reports. He pulled out one of the journals and opened it to a marked page. The entry was dated 1847. The handwriting was cramped and difficult to read, but Ward managed. The crew of the merchant vessel Patience reported hearing singing in the water during the night watch. Captain ordered all hands to remain below deck, but by morning, 7 men were missing. No signs of violence. No boats launched. Their effects remained in their berths, neatly arranged. One of the remaining crew claimed he saw them standing at the rail, listening to something he could not hear. When he called to them, they did not respond. They simply stepped over, one after another, into water so calm it barely rippled. Ward felt his throat tighten. How many of these are there? Hundreds, Blackwood said quietly. Different ships, different eras, different oceans. But the pattern is always the same. Calm seas, crew members acting distant, a sense of something waiting in the water. And then they leave. Not all of them, never all of them, just the ones who've been listening long enough. Why doesn't anyone talk about this? Pierce demanded. Why isn't this common knowledge? Because the ones it happens to don't come back to report it, Hale said. And the ones who survive don't want to sound insane. Blackwood nodded. The Navy has institutional memory, Lieutenant. It knows. It's always known. But what would you have them do? Issue warnings? Tell sailors not to listen to the ocean? You might as well tell them not to breathe. Ward looked down at the journal, at the careful, desperate handwriting of a chaplain from 1847 trying to make sense of something that defied sense, trying to preserve the memory of 7 men who'd walked into the water because something had asked them to. The Meridian's crew didn't fight it, Ward said. They documented it, signed their names, acknowledged what was happening. Why? Because fighting it doesn't work, Blackwood said. You can't fight something that lives inside your own thoughts, inside the rhythm of the waves and the sound of your own heartbeat. The only defense is to leave. Get off the ship. Get away from the water. But if you can't, he gestured at the pile of journals. Then eventually you stop wanting to. Pierce stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. We're sitting here treating folklore like it's operational intelligence. There has to be a rational explanation. Gas leak, contaminated water supply, some kind of pathogen that causes shared psychosis. Then why is the ship clean? Ward interrupted. Why is everything in perfect working order? Why did 48 people, including officers with years of experience and training, all succumb to the exact same delusion at the exact same time and execute a coordinated departure without leaving any evidence of coercion or struggle? Pierce opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know. None of us do, Ward said. But I know what I felt on that ship, and I know what I read in Voss's journal. She was fighting it. Right up until the end, she was trying to maintain command, trying to keep her crew together. And then she stopped. Because it got her too, Hale said. Or because she realized there was no point in fighting, Blackwood added softly. That's the real horror of it, isn't it? Not that they were taken, but that they chose to go. That whatever was calling them was offering something they wanted more than life. The room went silent. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like something trying to get in. Ward's radio crackled. A harbor patrol officer's voice came through, clipped and professional. Commander Ward, we have a situation at the Meridian's berth. You need to come down here. Now. They reached the pier at a dead run. The fog had thickened in the hour they'd been gone, turning the harbor into a gray void where shapes emerged and dissolved without warning. The Meridian sat exactly where they'd left her, but now there were people on the deck. Not people, shapes. Ward's hand went to his sidearm before his conscious mind caught up. Beside him, Hale had already drawn his weapon. Pierce froze. Blackwood simply watched, his face unreadable. The shapes weren't moving. They were just standing there, 6, 7, maybe 8 of them, lined up along the starboard rail, facing out toward the water. They were too far away to make out details through the fog, but Ward could see they were wearing uniforms. Navy uniforms. Who the hell authorized boarding? Ward demanded. The harbor patrol officer who'd called them, a young petty officer named Reeves, shook his head rapidly. No one, sir. The ship's been cordoned off since you left. No one's gone aboard. No one could have. We've had eyes on the gangway the whole time. Then who are they? Reeves didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because the shapes on the deck were impossible. Ward raised his radio. Whoever's on the Meridian, this is Commander Ward. Identify yourself. You are on a restricted vessel. Respond immediately. Nothing. The shapes didn't move, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the command in any way. They just stood there, facing the water, like men waiting for a signal. Maybe it's a crew, Pierce said, his voice thin. Maybe they came back. From where? Hale asked. No one had an answer. Ward started toward the gangway. Hale grabbed his arm. Don't. I need to see. You need to stay here. Whatever that is, it's not crew. It's not living people. And you know it. Ward didn't know it. He'd known at the moment he'd seen the shapes. There was something wrong about the way they stood. Too still. Too perfect. Like figures in a photograph. Or like men who'd forgotten how to move like living things. Blackwood stepped forward. Let me. Chaplain, that's not. I've done this before, Blackwood said quietly. Not exactly this, but close enough. I know the words. I know what to say to things that used to be men. Before Ward could argue, Blackwood was walking up the gangway. His steps were measured, deliberate. He reached the deck and paused, his head bowed slightly, and Ward realized he was praying. Not the standard naval prayer. Not any prayer Ward recognized. Something older. Something in Latin, maybe, or a language that just sounded like Latin. The words seemed to hang in the fog. And for a moment, just a moment, Ward thought he saw the shapes on the rail turn toward Blackwood. Then the fog thickened, and everything disappeared. Chaplain, Ward shouted into the gray void. No response. He started toward the gangway. Hale and Pierce moved with him. They were 3 steps up when they heard it. Singing, not voices. Not exactly. More like the memory of voices. Like an echo of something that had been sung a long time ago and had never quite faded. The melody was simple, almost childlike. The kind of song sailors used to sing during long watches when the work was hard and the company was all they had. But there was something underneath it. Something that made Ward's skin crawl. A harmony that didn't quite match. Notes that bent in ways notes shouldn't bend. The fog began to thin. Blackwood was standing on the deck, his back to them. In front of him, the shapes at the rail were clearer now. Clear enough to see that they were wearing Meridian uniforms. Clear enough to see their faces. Or rather, what should have been their faces. Where features should have been, there was just smooth, pale surface. Like skin pulled too tight. Like faces worn away by water and time until nothing remained but the suggestion of what had once been human. They were still singing. Blackwood raised his hand, made a sign in the air, cross, or something older than a cross. Spoke 3 words that Ward couldn't hear, but fell in his chest like a physical impact. The shapes stopped singing. They turned as one and looked at Blackwood. And then, without hurry, without hesitation, they stepped backward over the rail and dropped into the water below. No splash, no sound, just the fog closing over where they'd been, and then nothing. Blackwood stood there for a moment longer, his hand still raised, and then he lowered it slowly and walked back across the deck. He descended the gangway with the same measured calm he'd climbed it, and when he reached the pier, his face was pale but composed. They're not coming back, he said quietly. Not those ones. They've been gone too long. The water has them now. What were they? Pierce whispered. Echoes, Blackwood said. Impressions left behind. The Meridian remembers her crew, and sometimes in the right conditions, that memory becomes visible. Ward felt something cold settle in his stomach. How long will it last? Until the ship is destroyed, or until she goes back to sea and forgets them. Blackwood looked at Ward. She wants to go back, Commander. Can't you feel it? The Meridian isn't done sailing. She just needs a crew. No, Ward said immediately. Absolutely not. This ship is staying in port. She's going to be studied, analyzed, and if necessary, scuttled. That won't stop it, Hale said quietly. Whatever this is, it's not tied to one ship. It's in the water, in the routes we sail, in the spaces between land and horizon. You scuttle the Meridian, and in 6 months, a year, it'll be another vessel, another crew. Then what do you suggest? Hale looked out at the fog, at the water beyond. We stop pretending it's not real. We start teaching sailors what to listen for, what to watch for, how to recognize when they've been at sea too long, when they're starting to hear things they shouldn't hear. And if they're already hearing it, then we bring them home, Blackwood said, before they decide they don't want to come home anymore. Ward looked back at the Meridian. She sat quiet in her berth, fog swirling around her hull, and for just a moment, he could have sworn he saw more shapes moving on the deck, shadows that had once been men, echoes of a crew that had listened to something ancient and patient and had chosen to answer. The ocean doesn't take men by force. It waits for consent, and somewhere, deep in the water beneath every ship that had ever sailed, something was still waiting, still singing, still calling. The investigation officially ended 3 days later. That's what the report said, anyway. Investigation concluded. No evidence of foul play. Crew status. Missing, presumed lost at sea. Vessel to be decommissioned and scrapped. Ward signed it because he had to, because that's what commanders do when faced with situations that don't fit into boxes labeled mechanical failure or human error or enemy action. You write the report that makes sense to people who've never spent a night watch staring at water so dark, and still it looks like the sky fell into the ocean and drowned. You write the report that lets everyone sleep at night, everyone except you. He stood in his office now, 3 days since they boarded the Meridian, looking at a map of the North Atlantic. Red pins marked the ship's last known positions before she'd gone silent. Her patrol route was standard. Nothing unusual, nothing that would explain why an entire crew had decided to walk into the ocean and not come back. Except that wasn't quite right, was it? They had come back, just not in a way that showed up on manifest logs or casualty reports. A knock at the door. Ward didn't turn. Come in. Hale entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one on Ward's desk and kept the other. You look like hell, sir. Feel like it too. You sleeping? No. Hale nodded. He hadn't been sleeping either. Ward could see it in the lines around his eyes, the way his hands moved restlessly even when holding the coffee cup, the way he kept glancing toward the window, toward the harbor where the Meridian still sat, waiting. Demolition crews scheduled for Monday, Hale said. They're going to tow her out to deep water and sink her. Make it look like a training exercise. Will that be enough? To destroy the ship? Yes. To stop what's happening? Hale shook his head. I don't think so. I think Blackwood was right. This isn't about the Meridian. It's bigger than one vessel. Ward finally turned from the map. How many other ships do you think are out there right now? How many crews are hearing it? I don't know, but I've been asking around. Quietly, talking to old-timers. Guys who've been at sea 30, 40 years. Hale paused. They all know. They don't talk about it where anyone official can hear, but they know. They got names for it. The calling. The deep watch. The long tide. Different words, same thing. And no one's ever reported it. Would you? If you were a captain and you had to write up a report saying your crew was being influenced by something in the water, something that makes them want to jump overboard, you'd be relieved of command before you finished the first paragraph. Ward knew he was right. The Navy had protocols for almost everything: fire, flooding, combat damage, medical emergencies. But there was no protocol for your crew is being psychologically compromised by an unknown maritime phenomenon that may or may not be supernatural in nature. You couldn't train for that, couldn't drill for it, couldn't solve it with better equipment or stricter procedures. All you could do was recognize it and bring your people home before they stopped wanting to come home. I want to see it again, Ward said quietly. Hale looked at him. The ship, the journal, Voss's journal. I need to read it again. Hale set down his coffee cup. Commander, I don't think that's. I'm going anyway. You can come with me or stay here. Ward was already moving, grabbing his coat, heading for the door. Hale swore under his breath and followed. The Meridian was different at night. During the day, she'd looked abandoned, empty, a vessel waiting for crew that would never return. But at night, under the dock lights and the fog that never seemed to lift, she looked hungry. That's the only word Ward could think of. The ship looked hungry, like she was waiting for something, like she knew something was coming. The gangway was still cordoned off, yellow tape fluttering in a wind that Ward couldn't feel. A single harbor patrol officer stood watch, a different one than before, older, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen things he didn't talk about. Commander, the officer said, no surprise in his voice, like he'd been expecting this. You sure you want to go aboard? No, Ward said honestly, but I'm going anyway. The officer nodded. I'll be here. If you need anything. He didn't finish. They both knew there was nothing he could do if Ward needed help. Not against what was on that ship. Ward and Hale crossed the gangway. Their boots echoed on the metal deck, too loud in the silence. The ship smelled different at night. Salt and oil, yes, but something else. Something organic, like seaweed left to rot in the sun, like the breath of something that lived too deep for light. They moved through the passageways without speaking. Ward knew the way now. Down the forward hatch. Port side corridor. Third door on the left. Lieutenant Commander Voss's cabin. The journal was still there, sitting on the desk where Ward had left it. He picked it up, feeling the weight of it. The leather was damp. It shouldn't have been. The cabin was dry, the air stale but not wet. But the journal felt like it had been pulled from water. Ward opened it to the last entry and read it again by flashlight. Day 16. Position holding. Crew morale stable. No mechanical issues. Weather clear. Sea calm. Too calm. It's been 3 days since we heard it. He turned the page. There was more. There hadn't been more before. Ward was certain. The last entry had ended with I think we've been forgetting for a long time, and then blank pages. But now there was another entry, written in the same careful hand, dated 2 days after the ship had returned to port. 2 days after Voss had already been gone. Ward's hand started to shake. Commander Ward, if you're reading this, then you came back. I knew you would. Men like you always do. You can't help yourselves. You need to understand. You need answers. I don't have answers. I only have what I felt. What we all felt. It started slowly. Little things. Sounds in the water at night. Shadows moving beneath the hull. The feeling that something was matching our course, parallel to us, just out of sight. Waiting. The crew started changing. Not all at once. Gradually, they became quieter, more focused, like they were listening to something I couldn't hear. I tried to break the pattern, change our route, ordered extra drills, anything to keep them engaged, keep them present. But you can't compete with something that lives in the rhythm of the waves, something that's been calling sailors since before we had words for the ocean. By day 12, I could hear it too. Not a voice, not music, just a feeling, like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing, absolutely knowing, that if you stepped off, you wouldn't fall. You'd fly, or you'd float, or you'd become part of something bigger than yourself, something ancient and patient and vast. I fought it. I want you to know that. I fought it right up until the moment I realized I didn't want to fight it anymore. Because it wasn't taking us. It was offering us something. Peace, purpose, belonging. All the things we spend our lives searching for on land and never quite find. The water has always been our home, Commander. We just forgot. By the time you read this, we'll be where we're supposed to be, and the ship will be waiting for the next crew, for the next group of men and women who've spent too long at sea, who've heard the rhythm underneath the waves, who felt the pull. Maybe it'll be you. Maybe it already is. Don't fight it too long. The fighting only makes it harder. The water is patient. It can wait. Fair winds. LCDR-S Voss. Ward's hands were shaking so badly now, he almost dropped the journal. Behind him, Hill had gone completely still. That wasn't there before, Ward said. His voice sounded distant, hollow. No, Hale agreed. It wasn't. So how? I don't know. I don't want to know. Ward closed the journal, sat back on the desk, stepped back from it like it might reach out and grab him. We're leaving. They turned toward the door. It was closed. Ward hadn't closed it. Hale hadn't closed it. The door had been open when they'd entered, and now it was closed. And when Ward reached for the handle, it wouldn't turn. Hale, I'm trying, sir. It's not locked. It just won't open. Ward pulled harder. The handle turned, the mechanism worked, but the door stayed shut. Like something on the other side was holding it. Not forcing it, just holding it. Gently, patiently, waiting for them to stop fighting. Emergency exit, Ward said. Every cabin has. He turned. The cabin had changed. It was still Voss's cabin. Still the same size, the same layout. But the walls were darker now. Wet, not dripping, just damp like they'd been pulled from deep water. And the porthole, which should have shown the dock lights outside, showed only black. Deep, endless black. The kind of black you see when you're too far from shore and you look down into water that doesn't have a bottom. And in that black, something moved. Not a fish, not a whale, not anything that should exist in water that deep. Just a shape, vast and slow and patient, turning in the darkness, looking up at them with eyes that had never known light. Hale grabbed Ward's arm. Sir, we need to. The ship groaned. It was a long, low sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. From the hull, from the bulkheads, from the very metal of the vessel itself. Not a mechanical sound, not stress or strain or something shifting. It was organic, alive, like the ship was breathing, like she was calling. Ward felt it then, the pull, the same thing he'd felt in this cabin 3 days ago, the same thing Voss had described in her journal. Not fear, not danger, just a gentle, insistent pressure, like someone taking your hand and leading you somewhere safe, somewhere you belonged. The porthole darkened further. The shape in the water was closer now, rising, coming up from depths that shouldn't exist beneath a harbor only 40 feet deep. Commander, Hale's voice was tight. Whatever you're feeling right now, whatever it's telling you, it's not real. It's not. I know, Ward said. His voice sounded strange. Calm. Too calm. I know it's not real, but he wanted it to be. That was the horrifying part. Some deep, exhausted part of him wanted to believe that Voss was right, that the water was home, that if he just stopped fighting, if he just let go, everything would make sense. The years at sea, the friends lost, the constant, grinding effort to maintain order in a world made of chaos and salt water. All of it could just stop. All he had to do was listen. Hale pulled out his sidearm and fired 3 rounds into the door handle. The shots were deafening in the small cabin. The handle shattered. The door stayed closed. And the shape in the porthole was at the surface now, large enough to block out the entire window. Ward could see details, texture like skin but wrong, movements that didn't follow the logic of anatomy, something that might have been an eye but was too large, too aware. It was looking at him, seeing him, knowing him. Commander. Hale grabbed him, shook him. Ward, look at me. Ward blinked. The cabin came back into focus. The walls were just walls. The porthole was just a porthole. The shape was gone. Hale was staring at him, his face pale. You were about to open it. What? The porthole. You were reaching for it. You were going to open it. Ward looked down. His hand was extended, fingers inches from the porthole's locking mechanism. He hadn't even realized he'd moved. He pulled his hand back like he'd touched fire. The ship groaned again. This time, it sounded disappointed. "We're leaving," Ward said. His voice was shaking now. "Right now. And we're not coming back." Hale nodded and turned back to the door. This time, when he tried the handle, it opened easily, like it had never been stuck, like the ship was done with them. For now, they ran. Through the passageways, up the ladder, across the deck, down the gangway. They didn't stop until they were 50 yards from the Meridian, standing on solid ground with the harbor patrol officer staring at them. "Are you okay?" the officer asked. Ward wanted to say yes. Wanted to say they just finished their inspection and everything was fine. But he couldn't make the words come. Because nothing was fine. Nothing was ever going to be fine again. Behind them, the Meridian sat in her berth, fog curling around her hull. And on the water beside the ship, Ward could see ripples. Small circles spreading outward, like something large had just surfaced and then sank again, like something had been watching them leave, and was now deciding whether to follow. Ward didn't sleep that night, didn't even try. He sat in his office with the lights on and the blinds open, watching the harbor. The Meridian was visible from here, just a dark shape against darker water, but he could see her, could feel her presence like a weight pressing against his thoughts. Around 0300, his phone rang. "Ward, Commander, this is Harbor Patrol. We got another situation." Ward's stomach dropped. "The Meridian?" "No, sir. Different ship. The Constellation. Frigate out of Boston. She just radioed in. Says half her crew is acting strange. Standing at the rails. Not responding to orders. Captain's requesting immediate medical support and psychiatric evaluation." Ward closed his eyes. "How long have they been at sea?" A pause. 14 weeks, sir. Continuous patrol. 14 weeks. Just like the Meridian. Just like every other account Blackwood had shown him in those old journals. "Tell them to make for port immediately," Ward said. "Fastest possible speed. And when they get here, I want every member of that crew off the ship within 1 hour of docking. No one stays aboard. No one goes back for personal effects. They get off and they stay off." "Sir, I don't have the authority to—" "I'm giving you the authority. Send the order. Now." He hung up and immediately called Blackwood. The chaplain answered on the first ring, his voice alert despite the hour. "You've heard," Blackwood said. It wasn't a question. "The Constellation. How did you know?" "Because I've been watching the maritime reports. 3 other ships in the Atlantic have reported similar issues in the past week. Crew members acting distant. Strange sounds. Unusual calm. It's spreading, Commander. Or it's accelerating. I'm not sure which is worse." Ward looked out at the harbor. "At the Meridian. We need to do something. We're doing something. We're bringing them home. That's all we can do. The ones who've been listening too long." Blackwood's voice was heavy with something that might have been grief. "We can't save those, but we can save the ones who haven't started listening yet. We can teach them to recognize the signs, to know when it's time to come home. And if they don't listen, then they'll end up like Voss and her crew. Signatures on a page, names on a manifest, echoes on a ship that remembers them." Ward thought about the porthole, about the shape in the water, about how close he'd come to opening it, to letting whatever was on the other side in, or to letting himself out. "The Meridian needs to be destroyed," he said quietly. "Not scuttled, not sunk, destroyed, completely. So there's nothing left for it to remember with. That won't stop it. I know. But maybe it'll buy us time. Maybe it'll make it harder for whatever this is to find new crews. New ships." Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. "I'll make the necessary calls. We'll move the demolition up. Tomorrow night. Deep water. No witnesses. Thank you, Chaplain." "Commander," Blackwood hesitated. "What you felt on that ship. What it showed you. I need you to understand that it wasn't lying." "Not exactly. The ocean does offer peace. It does offer belonging. But it's the peace of deep water and the belonging of things that forgot how to breathe air. Don't mistake that for home." "I won't." But even as Ward said it, he felt the pull, faint but present, like a tide that never quite stopped pulling, even when you were standing on solid ground. The ocean was patient, and it could wait. They destroyed the Meridian the following night, towed her out to deep water, 200 fathoms, far enough that even if she settled intact, no one would be tempted to dive her. No one would be tempted to explore. Ward watched from the deck of the tug. Hale stood beside him. Pierce had refused to come, said he didn't want to see it, didn't want the memory of a ship dying. Blackwood was there, though, standing at the rail with his hands folded, lips moving in silent prayer. The demolition charges were set professionally, precisely. When they detonated, the Meridian didn't sink slowly like ships in movies. She broke apart, shattered, pieces of hull and deck and superstructure tumbling into the dark water, trailing bubbles and oil. She was gone in less than 3 minutes. Ward expected to feel relief. Instead, he felt loss. Deep, unexpected loss. Like he'd just watched something irreplaceable disappear. "It's done," Hale said quietly. Ward nodded, but he kept staring at the water where the Meridian had been. And in that water, just for a moment, he thought he saw shapes. Figures standing in the waves, watching the surface, waiting. Then they were gone. Maybe they'd never been there at all. The Constellation made port 2 days later. Her crew was immediately cycled off and sent for psychiatric evaluation. None of them could explain what had happened. They just said they'd been tired, that the water had been so calm, that they'd heard something beautiful and wanted to get closer to it. 11 of them were hospitalized. The rest were given shore duty and monitored. 3 weeks later, 2 of them went missing from base. Their bodies were never found, but witnesses reported seeing them walking toward the beach late at night, walking into the water, not swimming, not struggling, just walking until the waves closed over their heads. Ward got the report on his desk with a note from Blackwood. The water doesn't forget. He filed it with the others. The growing pile of incidents. Ships reporting strange crew behavior. Sailors going missing from shore stations near the ocean. Old maritime mysteries suddenly making horrible sense. And every night, Ward stood at his window and looked out at the harbor, at the water that never stopped moving, at the horizon that promised distance, but delivered only more ocean. And sometimes, in the deep hours before dawn, he could hear it. Not a voice, not music, just a feeling, like standing at the edge of something vast and patient and eternal, like standing at the edge of home. He wondered how long he could keep refusing, how long before he stopped fighting, how long before he walked down to the water and didn't come back. The ocean was patient. It could wait. It had been waiting since before there were ships, since before there were sailors, since the first humans looked out at the endless blue and wondered what lived beneath. And it would keep waiting. For Ward, for Hale, for every sailor who spent too long listening to the rhythm of the waves. Because the ocean doesn't take men by force. It waits for consent. And eventually, everyone who sails long enough hears the call. The only question is whether they answer.